Okay, we're going to begin stitching. We are going to start with the 3 base lines. So this bottom line, this middle line, and this top line up here. I'm going to be showing the tutorials with the stick and stitch paper just because it's a little bit more clear, but the same steps would follow regardless if you're tracing or doing stick and stitch. So I am starting with all 6 strands here of the color 522. And I'm using my needle that has a little bit of a larger eye because it's easier to get all 6 strands through. So we're going to do just a simple back stitch over this bottom line here. And for back stitch, you can just come up through the fabric and make one little straight stitch. So make a down stitch a stitch length away, however long you want your stitch lengths to be. And then you're going to come up a stitch length away from where you made your down stitch. Oops. And you'll go back down through that same hole that you just previously stitched. And you're going to repeat that all the way across. So each stitch now I'm coming up a stitch length away. And I'm going back down through that same hole. Come up a stitch length away and go back down through that same hole of the previous stitch. So the shorter that you keep your stitch lengths, the easier it is to make them kind of all of a uniform length. But if they're not all the exact same length, that's okay. It looks cute regardless. So you'll go all the way across like this. And when you finish, you'll tie off a knot in the back and then we'll do the next baseline. Okay, we've got the bottom row done, so now we're going to move on to the middle one. This one is going to also start with a back stitch, but then we're going to turn it into a whipped back stitch. So I'm starting with all 6 strands of 3011 here. And again, I'm just going to start by doing a back stitch all the way across with 3011. You may run out of thread somewhere in the middle. This is a pretty long line across. So just tie off and restart if you do. And then once you finish that back stitch, hop back on and I'll show you how to do the whipped back stitch part. That'll make this look a little bit different and fun. Okay, so I've completed this whole thing as a back stitch. So now you're going to take 3 strands of the ecru, the kind of off-white color, and you're going to come just 3 strands, not all 6. So I'm using my smaller eyed needle now, just because it's a little bit easier. So you're going to come up through the fabric at the end of the back stitch line, and you're going to push your needle underneath that first stitch and bring it all the way through. Whoops. Okay. And then I'm going to come back down to the same side. It doesn't matter if you start from the top or the bottom, you just want to be consistent the whole time. So since I started from the bottom, I'm going to come back to the bottom here and push it underneath and through the next stitch. Come back to the bottom, push it underneath and through the next stitch, and pull through. Come back to the bottom, push it underneath and through the next stitch, and pull through. And I will continue to do this all the way across this line. Whipped back stitch is definitely one of my favorite stitches. It is such a fun one. Hopefully you guys love it and use it in all of your projects. I think this is the only time we use it in this pattern, but so you can kind of see it gives like this really fun green and white sort of little striped effect. I like to call it the candy cane stitch during the holidays, but it's a really fun one. So go ahead and get all the way through. When you do get to the end, you would just, let's pretend this was the end since I'm not there yet, you would just make a down stitch wherever you end off and then tie off in the back and you'll be done with that part. Okay, for this top row up here, we're going to use 3 strands of the color 320 and we're going to do a simple outline or a stem stitch. So I'm starting down here and I'm going to come up through the fabric And I'm going to begin to make a down stitch about a stitch length away, but I'm going to leave a little loop out to one side here, like so. And I'm going to come up about midway on the inside of that loop on the line that I'm stitching, and then I'm going to pull the thread in the direction of the line that I'm stitching all the way. Then I will make another down stitch about a stitch length away. Again, leave a loop out underneath. And then come up about midway to 2/3 of the way. And then pull in the direction of the line that I'm stitching. And you're going to continue that way all the way across this line. This is called an outline stitch, stem stitch. Oops, just got a little dot. So you'll continue that way all the way across this line. Okay, we're going to start with all of the elements on the bottom row here first, and we're going to start with the swing set. So for that, I have 3 strands of 433, and I'm going to do a back stitch for the frame of the swing set here. And really the only note here is just to keep your stitch lengths nice and small. And just back stitch from one side to the other. While you still have 3 strands of 433, or you can grab the other 3 strands if you ran out, we're also going to stitch in the little bottom part of each swing. So for that, I'm just going to do a satin stitch, and I'm going to be doing that satin stitch horizontally. So I'll just fill in the bottom of each of these. Little rectangle shapes. That would be the swings, like so. And I'll do the other one just the same. So go ahead and repeat that for the other one, and then we'll move on. Okay, then we're going to fill in each of these strings coming down to the swings, strings to the swings, with 3 strands of 7, and that's just going to be a straight stitch. So you'll just pull up and make a down stitch at the top there. Repeat for the other line. And repeat for the other swing as well. Simple, simple. Okay, so for the leaves, we're going to start by stitching in the kind of vine that wraps around like this, and then like this, all the way to here, and then we'll do the leaves. So I have right now 3 strands of 3011, and I'm just going to do a stem or an outline stitch for the vine first. So that's the same kind of stitch we did for that top baseline. And the key here is keep your stitch lengths really, really short so that you can navigate around all these. There's some kind of like tight curves that come in to the vines here. And you're gonna actually just stitch over any existing elements. So I'm kind of going over the frame of the swing set here. I'm going to go over it again right here. And we're going to do really, really short stitch lengths here because this is a big curve. So you can see how I'm just kind of working around here. So go ahead and get that whole vine done, and then I'll show you how you can add in a little more greenery with some leaves here. Oops. Okay, now to fill in the little leaves, you're just gonna do like a little straight stitch. I'm still using 3 strands of 3011 here, and I like to repeat that usually 2 times. So I'm going to do the straight stitch, and then I'm going to go back over that stitch again just to make like a little leaf coming off of the vine here. And it can be kind of hard to see your leaves, or maybe you didn't even draw them in if you traced this. It doesn't really matter where they are, honestly. You just want to add a few coming off the vine throughout, so that we get a little more greenery, a little more fullness here. Like so. As you can see, I'm just making a little straight stitch, and I'm just repeating that. So I'm going back up to the top of my straight stitch, down the same exact hole, so it's just a little bit thicker and more full. So I'll go all the way around the vine here, and then we're finished up with the first element here, and we'll move on to the next tree. Okay, so next we're going to fill in this tree here. I have 3 strands of the color 433, and I'm just going to do a back split stitch to go up the trunk of the tree here. So for a back split stitch, it's very similar to a back stitch. You're just going to change the place that you do your down stitch. So I started with a little straight stitch. I'm going to come up a stitch length away, and I'm going to make my down stitch through the I'm going to split these threads, and I'm going to go down about halfway through the center of that last stitch. And I'll repeat that all the way up. Go up once more right to here, and then for each of the little branches coming off the tree, you can keep those simple and just do like a straight stitch down that center line towards the trunk. Keep in mind that there would be like a little leaf at the end, so I'm just starting a little bit below that like little leaf right there. Repeat for the other side, and then we'll add some leaves. Okay, so for each of the leaves, we're going to fill them in kind of the same way that we did for these little leaves on the vine over here. You're just going to take 3 strands of the really pretty color 320, and you'll just, I'm going to show you on here right at the end so you can see really well. I'm coming up right at the end of the leaf and going towards the branch with a straight stitch, and I'm going to double that up. So I'm going to again come up right where I came up before. Well, I have to watch out because my knot's right there. Come up just a little bit to the side since I have the knot there. And I'm just going right over that stitch again to make it stand out a little bit more, make it a little bit more defined and noticeable, a little chunkier. So you'll do that for each leaf. Basically, you're doing a repeated straight stitch. So I'm stitching it once, and I'm stitching over it again just to make it a bit more defined and noticeable. So about like that. So you'll do each little leaf coming off of the tree here, and then we're done with this cute little tree, and we'll move on to our little flower house. Okay, next we're going to do this sweet little flower house, and I'm gonna start with the petals on the flower in the middle. You're going to grab 3 strands of the color 304, the really bright pink color, and you're going to do a little lazy daisy stitch for each of these petals. So you're going to start at the base of one petal, just pick any one, and come all the way up through that, and then you're going to go back down through that same hole, and then before you pull all the way through, you're going to leave a little loop out around the petal, and you'll come up on the inside of that loop at the tip of the petal shape. with your needle, and you'll pull until you get the petal shape that you want. So you may not need to pull all the way tight, because if I pull this much tighter than this, it's going to end up looking more like a straight line rather than a rounded petal. So just about like that. It's okay if there's a little bit of space in there, that's fine. And to finish, you're going to make a down stitch just on the other side of the loop. So right now I'm on the inside of the loop. I'm going to make a down stitch just on the other side of the loop to anchor it into place, like that. And then you'll repeat that for each petal on the flower. Okay, so I'll finish that up. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is fill in the door. So I'm going to start with 3 strands of 301, and we're going to fill in the door with a vertical satin stitch. So I'm just starting with a little straight stitch in the middle that's going to get completely covered so that I'm not running into my knot. And then I like to start usually in the middle of the door and pull a stitch down, straight down. And then I'll just work on either side of that. So with satin stitch, you're always coming up on the same side every time, but you're following the line of the shape that you're trying to fill, and you're just doing your stitches right next to each other, boom, boom, boom. So I'm going to come up a little bit below that one, following the arc of the door, and go down next to this one. So you'll fill in the door completely, and then we're going to do a couple more things with this color before we come back and do the doorknob and the siding here. In the very middle of the flower, still with 3 strands of 301, we're going to do a 2-wrap French knot. So for a French knot, you're going to pull all the way up through the fabric. You're going to hold your needle horizontally underneath the thread, and I'm going to wrap the thread around the needle 2 times. Loosen it up a little bit so that I can angle my needle down through the center of the flower. And now I'm going to pull this with my non-stitching hand kind of tight again and push my needle down through that knot. And then I have my knot. I made that look pretty simple. French knots can actually be a little tricky, so it may take some practice, but you can just do your best with that part. And then we're also going to fill in each of these little like triangular sections on the corner of that siding of the house with 3 strands of 301 and just a satin stitch, and you can work diagonally following that, you know, exterior line of the triangle. So use that as your direction guide here and get that all filled in. I'm gonna have to probably tie off here in a second and get a little bit more thread. But then so once you finish that, then we can fill in the rest of the siding of the house and then also the roof. So I'm just making my stitch lengths a little bit shorter each time here. till it's gonna get really short right here in the corner. So just about like that, and I'll repeat that on the other side. Okay, let's fill in the siding now. So for this, I have 3 strands of the off-white ecru color. We're gonna fill in the siding of the house with a vertical satin stitch. So I like to start, actually, sorry, I'm just gonna start with a little straight stitch somewhere kind of in the middle, like this. So I did a little straight stitch. Now I'm gonna come up to one of the sides here and I'll pull all the way straight down. And I'm just gonna fill in the whole house this way. When you get to the flower, you have to kind of work around it and shorten the length of your stitches to work within that flower. So once I get there, I'll pop back on here and kind of show you what I mean. But for now, until I get there, I'm just pulling straight stitches down. So here I am, I got some new thread. I've worked underneath this petal, so I need to fill in kind of this area right here. So I'll just start right here and work down to the end of this petal. So it's like you're coloring. You just want to fill in the space without coloring or stitching over any of the things that are already there, which is one of the reasons I like to do kind of these little interior elements first. It's just because I find it a little bit easier to stitch around them, knowing, you know, exactly where they end up, so that I don't have to, I find it a little bit easier. Because satin stitch is pretty forgivable. You can cover areas, you can go back, you can stitch over, so that's something that's nice about that. So you can see I'm just doing some really small stitches to fill in here, and then I'll come back up here and kind of work on filling in this space now. So I'm going to pull this straight down. And I'll go back in here and fill all of this in. So just like that. Okay, so you're going to keep going like that until you have the whole siding filled in. Okay, I finished all the siding on the house. The last thing you're going to do is, still with 3 strands of ecru, you're going to come up through the middle of the door and just do another little 2-wrap French knot to make the doorknob. Okay, last thing we're going to do is the roof. So for the roof, I have grabbed all 6 strands of the 304, the same pink color, and I'm using my needle with a little bit of the larger eye now, just to make it a little bit easier. And you're going to fill in the roof with a back stitch, actually. And when we do a little back stitch as a filler here, it kind of just gives a little more of a textured look, almost like a little bit of brick work, you could think, for the top of the roof here. But it's just a nice variation to satin stitch. So you're just gonna back stitch all the way across here. Like so. And then once you get to the end of this line, you can back stitch again on the row going up from there. So now I'll just, but I'm kind of going to stagger where I start and stop my stitches. So now I'm going to go to here and go back across. Oops, sorry. Come up right here. So you'll just fill in the whole roof this way, and then we'll be done with our sweet little flower house. That one was a little bit high, but I can always fill in if it's too much space later. Okay. Okay, moving on to the ice cream truck, we're going to start with the little wheels down here. That is going to be 3 strands of 7 and just a horizontal satin stitch. So with this circular shape, I usually like to start in the middle and pull my stitch all the way across and then fill in on either side of that and make my stitches shorter going down or going away from the middle each time to get the kind of nice circular shape that we're looking for here. And you can just kind of go until you hit the bottom stitches that we already have in there. Sorry, make sure you guys can see that. And then I'll go up to the top. And of course you will repeat this for the other wheel. And that'll be it for this color here. We'll move on to the next part. Next thing we're going to do is fill in the top line here and the bottom little line here on the ice cream truck. For that, you're going to use 6 strands of 3778, and you will just do a little back stitch here. And I like to keep the stitch lengths nice and short so I can get in as many as possible. And so you'll get this top one done, and then you'll repeat going across the bottom where the tires are. And then we will continue on. Okay, we're going to outline the window with 3 strands of 522 here. And so that's just going to be a back stitch. So you're going to just back stitch real fast around the outline of the window. And then we can go ahead and fill in the siding of the ice cream truck. But I like to just do a little outline of the window just to kind of give a little bit more definition. It's just going to be a slightly lighter color than what we do the siding in. And it just helps me keep my stitches nice and neat when we get to them. So then I'll go all the way up around, and then we can finish off with the siding, and then we'll do the little popsicle and ice cream cone on the inside there last. Be sure to keep your stitch lengths nice and short as you're working around the curve here so that you can really keep those curvy lines curvy. Okay, now we're going to do the siding of the ice cream truck. That's going to be a vertical satin stitch with 3 strands of 320. So you can start at whichever side you want to. I'm starting over here since I have a nice straight line to pull down. And then I will just fill in all the way around. And you want to, again, work around the interior elements here. So as you get closer to the window, you're just going to shorten the length of your stitches right here. And then these are all going to be really tiny little stitches to fill in underneath the window until you can make them go, you know, straight across again. And then you'll fill in some smaller stitches here and then tiny here. And you'll have that all filled in. Then we can move on to just these little cute little ice cream details in the little window. Okay, things start getting pretty tiny here. So we're going to start with 3 strands of 433 to fill in this little line on like the popsicle stick and then the cone of the ice cream cone. So for the popsicle stick, you're just going to do a straight stitch. Tiny little straight stitch, 1 little stitch. That's it for that. And then for the ice cream cone, you can do, think of it like a satin stitch or just a few little straight stitches, all going towards that tip or that center tip of the cone. Just trying to make a little bit of a triangular shape here if we can. So I might just do a couple right here in the middle to fill this in. Okay, so I've got kind of this triangular shape and then the little stick for the popsicle stick, and now we'll fill in the popsicle and the ice cream scoops. So for the popsicle, we have 3 strands of 304, and we're just gonna do a little tiny little satin stitch horizontal to fill in this popsicle shape. So you'll fill in a few stitches that just go straight across like so. And then as you get to the top, you'll make your stitches even tinier to get that curved shape. Just gonna see if I can get a little tiny stitch in right here. So just about like that. I didn't go quite all the way up, but I think that looks good. Okay, and then for the ice cream scoops, we're gonna do 3 1-wrap French knots right on top of each other. So I have 3 strands of ecru here. Oh my goodness. And I'm just gonna do a 1-wrap French knot at the base, and then I'll do 1 right on top of that. Might only be able to fit in 2, but if you can fit in 3, that's great. I'm gonna fit in 1 more right here. So I've got 3 cute little scoops of ice cream. Okay, our ice cream truck is done. Now we're gonna come over here and do the clouds with the sunshine. All right, moving on over to the sunshine, we're gonna fill in the kind of main part of the sun here. I have all 6 strands of 729, and I'm going to do just a back stitch to fill in the sun here. So I'm gonna start by going all the way around the arc, or the kind of arch shape of the sun first with a back stitch, and I'll use that same pattern to fill in the interior of the sunshine using a back stitch as well. Be careful sometimes when you have all 6 strands, your strands can just kind of want to get knotted. So just move a little bit slower with them so you don't get a tangled mess. So now that I've gone all the way around once, I'm going to repeat that, but just work towards the inside of those stitches. So I'm working from out in to fill in the sunshine. And when you get to the middle, your stitches, let me show you on this one. Your stitches, I feel like I'm on a cooking show. Like, here's one that's done. Okay, so when you get to the inside, you'll just you might just have to do like a little vertical one right there. It's gonna get harder to really get that curve shape in. So you can just kind of fill in with some straight stitches to just get that space all filled in. Okay, for the rays of the sunshine, we're gonna switch to just 3 strands of the 729 yellow, and these are all just gonna be a little straight stitch. So real simple, you'll just start from the exterior and make your stitch go into the interior. And then you can do a little bit of a shorter one. So just continue like that all the way around. Okay, last but not least, we're gonna fill in all of this little cloud space, And for that, I have 3 strands of ecru, and I'm going to be doing some 3-wrap French knots. And you'll just fill in this whole space with these French knots. You could do 1 or 2 wrap French knots if you want them to be tighter and not quite as chunky. You could vary the number of wraps. I just like the 3 here because it looks nice and chunky and fluffy for our little cloud. So you'll just fill in all of that area with these French knots, and then we'll be done with our whole first little row, and we can get started with this middle row next.